A Trip into the Darkness. Chapter 20. The long drive to New Orleans was painful. Mallory had to stop twice for gas. The first time, she asked the guy beside her to use his card on her pump so she could fill up. He had happily obliged, sliding his card for her, then continued to stand there staring at her. She had to tell him to go away before she killed him. The second time she stopped, the outcome was not as pretty. Arriving on the outskirts of New Orleans, Mallory got out of her stolen car and observed the sky overhead. It was just becoming dark as the sun sank down low off in the distance and clouds filled the heavens. The small station she was at was mostly vacant except for one other car beside hers. Walking over to it, she asked the driver for money, and she was hit with the smell of fresh blood. The man standing at the pump had a bandage on his left hand, and she could see crimson staining the material. He had looked at her and smiled. The red haze blanketed her vision, and the next thing she realized, she had him pinned against the pump and her mouth was at his throat. She heard gurgling sounds and felt his energy become weak. Forcing herself to release him, the man sagged against his truck and his eyes rolled back in his head. She shook his body, but he didn't move. Horror filled her when she listened for a heartbeat and couldn't hear it. There was no energy stirring within the man in front of her, meaning that she had just murdered her first person without so much as a thought. The wound at his neck was still open and gaping gruesomely from her sharp teeth, but no blood seeped from the incisions. Mallory leaned in and licked her tongue over the wound, and the flesh sealed itself shut. Still holding him up against the truck, she looked around the parking lot to find it still empty. Biting her bottom lip, she reached into the man's back pocket and pulled out his wallet. She then opened his driver's side door and shoved his body inside. The dead man's body sagged in the seat and his head rolled to the side. Tears streamed down Mallory's face as she looked in his wallet and found a couple of $100 in small bills. Taking out 2 20s, she left the rest in his wallet, then slid it back into his pants pocket before closing the door. "I'm so sorry," Mallory mumbled as she wiped her face, then went inside the station to prepay 40 on the pump she was at. She could not believe how easily she had just killed a man. She hadn't even realized what was happening until it was too late. Continuing to drive, she decided that she was in fact turning rabid. Even with blood in her system, It was a little past 7 p.m. when Mallory's GPS informed her that she had made it into the heart of New Orleans. As she drove through the bustling city, she felt like a fool for coming here. What did she expect to find? Had she thought that she'd be driving along Bourbon Street and see a huge sign saying, "The Witch is in"? Stopping at a red light, she watched the slew of people that were walking around the streets and going from one bar to the next. She could not very well park and walk around with them, not after what she had done to the man at the gas station. No, she didn't have a clue what to do. Turning onto another little street, she discovered that the sidewalks were not as crowded. In fact, she didn't see anyone around. Continuing down the dimly lit, abandoned road, she spotted a dark alley and something started calling to her. Goosebumps rose on her skin and she felt the need to see what was down that alley. Was that my name being whispered? She was on the outskirts of the city now, in what would likely be considered a sketchy area that wasn't marked to tourists. Most of the buildings looked like they were old and falling apart. A couple of the street lights were burnt out and others flickered as if they were on their last leg. Mallory edged her car to the side of the empty street and parked. Turning off the engine, she sat there in the quiet and waited. Was she really about to risk it walking around in public? She was about to gamble with the lives of every person she happened to encounter. The sky was becoming dark, and off in the distance she could see strips of pink, red, and purple in the sky. It looked like there was a fire in the heavens. She felt like there was a fire inside of her soul, as the demon within her demanded that she find more blood right away. A lone person walked by her car and scurried down the street. The demon whispered that she needed to follow and attack that lone person. She saw herself in her mind's eye grabbing the human and shoving them up against a building, dropping her head to their neck as her teeth tore through the person's throat and blood sprayed her face as she drank deeply. It'd be too easy. Her teeth and claws lengthened, and her stomach clenched in pain. Grinding her aching teeth, Mallory dropped her head in her hands and focused on her breathing. Time passed, and when she looked back up, she felt calmer while she gazed at the barren street. An eerie feeling went through her as she looked around. No cars drove by, and the street lamp she was under flickered. Surely she could risk a quick stroll down the sidewalk to the alley she had seen, right? If she happened to walk by anyone, she would just hold her breath and not look at them. As long as no one tried approaching her, then she wouldn't have to kill anyone. Mallory hurried and opened her door and jumped out of the car before she could change her mind. She lit a cigarette and locked the BMW, then started walking down the sidewalk. The dark street was unnaturally cold, even with her black sweatshirt on. Listening, Mallory noticed how quiet the area was. She was in a city. She should have been able to hear traffic and car alarms, maybe the sound of a siren off in the distance. But as she walked, she realized she didn't hear anything, not even the sound of the wind. Approaching the alley, she heard the sound of old jazz music drifting her way. How strange. Maybe there is a bar back here, Mallory thought as she started walking into the empty alleyway. She had not seen a single person wandering about since she got out of her car. A little way in, she finally noticed the glass door with a faint light shining within. There was also a little street light beside the entrance to the building. As she got closer, she read the sign hanging above the door. Monique's Place of Magic. Mallory rubbed her eyes as she stepped in front of the glass entrance. Standing there, she felt something calling to her from within the building. What were the odds of her actually finding the witch in the middle of such a big, chaotic city? Mallory debated on not going in and just turning around. What if the person inside triggered her demon and she attacked and killed them? The red haze had not fully left her vision since she had killed the man at the gas station. She worried that it wouldn't take much for another repeat like that to happen. She had to try, though. She hadn't stumbled upon this shop by accident. With a deep breath, Mallory opened the door and stepped inside. The strong smell of smoke hit her like a brick wall. It was so potent, and it made her head spin. It was hard to see through the smudge swirling around her, clouding her vision. The scent was sweet and musky, unlike anything she had smelled before, with hints of marijuana in the mix. Mallory covered her mouth with her arm and started coughing as her eyes began to water. "Welcome to Monique, young one. How can I help you today?" Mallory looked up to see a very attractive, dark-skinned woman approach her. She was tall, and her body was sculpted like an Amazon warrior. She had high cheekbones and jade-green eyes. The woman's hair was in dreadlocks, and there were beads and other shiny objects braided within. However, it was not her looks or even her odd choice of clothes that had Mallory frozen. It was the smell of her blood and the strong feel of her energy. Only one other being had felt and smelled like her, and that had been Troy. "You're a vampire," Mallory stated as she continued to stare at the stunning woman. "Very observant, changeling," the woman laughed while moving closer to her. Fear and anxiety went through Mallory, and she took a step back. She expected to feel a raging bloodlust, but her head was spinning thanks to the smoke that was rolling from a bundle of herbs in the woman's hand. Her entire body was beginning to feel numb. "You are very strung out," the woman told her and clicked her tongue in disapproval. "Didn't your master warn you about the risks of going on a blood strike? In this shape, you're a menace to society." "I don't have a master," Mallory stated, looking away from the woman to better examine her surroundings. Her shop was as odd and unique as she was. Tapestry with different plants and colors covered the walls. All around there were bundles of herbs and bones hanging from the ceiling, along with multiple strings of bells. Live plants were littered about in random places. There was a counter in the back that was overflowing with rocks, bones, and other random things. Against the walls there were shelves with glass jars full of more herbs. Some of the jars held liquid within. Off to one side of the room, Mallory spotted a table and a couple of chairs. "That is a lie. You would not be who you are today if you didn't have a master," the woman told her with a scowl on her face. Mallory looked back at the woman and said, "I ran away. He abused me and kept me locked away in a hole only to be drugged and used." Nodding, the woman walked towards her table and chairs, and Mallory followed her and sat down when the woman did. "Unfortunately for you, that is often the case for changelings. Without a master to feed and take care of you, you will not survive. I assume that you have already come to this conclusion, thus the reason you sought me out. Also unfortunate for you is the matter that I cannot help you with your situation." There has to be something that can be done, or some advice you can offer me, Mallory said before covering her mouth as she started coughing again. Smiling, the woman nodded. There are herbs you can smoke that will slow down the change you're going through, but they will not stop it. Human blood is too weak for someone like you to survive on, even though I'm sure you crave it like a heroin addict craves its next fix. When the woman told her that, Mallory realized the solution. Heroin was the answer. It would make her so numb that she'd not be able to kill innocent people. Do you sell heroin? She asked. With a sharp laugh, the woman asked, Do you have money? At that moment, with the room spinning and Mallory's fingers tingling, she felt like a complete moron, walking into someone's place of business and asking for a handout. She dropped her head into her hands. Of course, she would not have thought about money, because in the past 2 days, everyone she encountered just willingly gave her whatever she wanted. Lifting her head back up, Mallory looked at the woman and shook her head. No, I don't have anything besides a stolen car, the clothes on my back, a bag full of narcotic pills, and a psychopath hot on my trails. Perhaps also the blessing from the goddess Freya, but even that can only get me so far with nowhere safe to run. The woman smiled and nodded at her. Life is tough, kid, but I like your spunk. Give me your hands. The woman reached across the table with her palms up. Biting her bottom lip, Mallory slowly reached her hands out to place them in the waiting palms. As soon as she made contact with the woman, she grabbed her in an iron hold, and her eyes snapped shut. Mallory's breath was knocked out of her as the woman's energy bombarded her senses. It felt like she was grabbing onto a live wire as every nerve within her body lit up with the contact. As they sat there, grasping each other's hands, Mallory lost her grasp on reality. The world faded into nothing but electricity and power. She felt like a conductor, feeling its power flow through her body. As suddenly as the woman's energy hit her, it left her when she released Mallory's hands and yanked her arms across the table. Blinking her eyes, her vision came back into focus. Mallory said, You're Monique, aren't you? Yes, child, I am, and you are on a very interesting path. You have the ability to affect a lot of people's lives if you stay alive long enough, that is. Mallory raised an eyebrow at that statement. I won't lie, I've been feeling rather unhinged the past few days, so I'm not sure that I will be having a positive effect on anyone. Monique nodded, tapping her index finger on her chin. I think I'm going to help you, Mallory. Of course, you will have to accept my help and do exactly as I say. Mallory narrowed her eyes at the woman. She had not told Monique her name, and the way she had said help screamed of foul play. Then again, as the woman said, she was dying and turning into a rabid beast, so what did she have to lose? Why would you help me if I don't have anything to give you? Simple. I have something I need you to do for me, and in the process you will find the cure to your problem. You mean I could be human again? What about the psycho chasing me? Is there a way to lose him forever? Mallory asked her these questions in a rush, hope blossoming inside of her chest. She had assumed she would be doomed, but if there was even a small chance for change, she wanted to take it. Instead of answering her, Monique stood up and retrieved a large empty mason jar and a knife. Walking back to the table, she removed the lid and then lifted her wrist above the top before bringing the knife down on her arm. Slicing a deep gash in her flesh, the strong smell of powerful blood filled the room, and Mallory grabbed her seat to keep herself from throwing herself at the woman. When Monique's blood started to slow and the wound began to heal, she cut herself again. After a few more cuts, the mason jar was full to the brim. Setting the knife down, Monique screwed the lid onto the jar and then walked over to a rack full of herbs. She grabbed a full jar and then went to her counter and grabbed what appeared to be a glass pipe. Walking back to the table, she set these items down before disappearing out of the room through a door that was covered in hanging beads. Second later, she stormed back into the room with a small wooden box. The cure I am offering you will take you far away from here. Of course, I will give you something to help keep your mind and body sane. If you accept, you will not only be helping me, but in turn helping yourself too. Do you accept this gift I offer you? Licking her dry lips, Mallory contemplated her options. In reality, she knew she really didn't have anything to contemplate. She had sought out a witch who would give her answers to her problems, and Monique was offering her that. even if her answer was vague and left her clueless. She had nothing to lose at this point. She needed to disappear. Mallory's favorite life motto popped into her head. Fuck it. I accept, she told Monique. A smile spread across the woman's face before she said, Good answer. Opening the small wooden box, she pulled out a golden amulet that was about the size of a goose egg. There was a chain attached to it, and rubies and diamonds reflected the light. This is the necklace of Dagda. Monique paused and glanced at Mallory's neck before continuing. In Norse mythology, Dagda is often compared to the great god Odin. I need you to take it to a man named Brino who lives in Brazil. He resides in a hut beside the Amazon River. Once you find him, you will tell him you are seeking the cure, and once he agrees to take you to it, you give this to him. You will not let anyone else touch this amulet besides Brino. Of course, once you are cured, you will return to me whatever is left over. Monique quit talking, and Mallory sat there speechless. She wanted her to go to Brazil? She did not have the slightest clue how to even travel there. It's not like she had a passport or even a driver's license at this point in her life. Without airfare, she would be left trying to drive there, and she didn't even know. And even though she was not a history major, Mallory was fairly certain that a person wouldn't be able to just drive down South America until they reached Brazil. I don't understand. How am I going to know how to find Brino? Isn't the Amazon River like 4,000 miles long or something crazy like that? How will I know where to look once I get there? I trust that you'll figure it out, child. After all, I did just see your future, so I have faith. Mallory wanted to scream that her statement made no sense and that it would be more than likely a suicide mission. But what else was she to do? It was this, or wait around until Troy showed back and dragged her to that concrete box. Okay, I guess I'll just drive to Mexico and maneuver my way down to Brazil. I can do that. I'm powerful now and people like to listen to me. It should be no problem. Exactly. You are a succubus changeling. You hold powers over the weak, Monique told her. Succubus? Like a female demon that feeds off its victim's sexual pleasure? That's exactly it, yes. How else do you think you hold so much power over humans? Anyway, I'll require a trade before you leave here today, just something to seal the deal, sort of speak. I have nothing of value to trade, Mallory responded. Of course you do. That necklace under your sweatshirt will do the trick. It hasn't left your skin for years. Something like that holds such sentimental value also holds great power. Mallory reached up and touched her mother's necklace. It was nothing special, just a gold chain with a golden rune Wunyo dangling from it. Don't be discouraged. You will have this amulet to wear around your neck until you finally have your cure. I personally find that to be a very even trade. A simple necklace for your old life back. Perhaps when you bring me my part of the cure, I will even return the necklace to you as a thanks for completing the task. Mallory nodded as she took everything in Monique was saying. Perhaps she should just have gone to the airport and convinced a flight attendant to let her on board. Then she could have flown overseas to Italy to spend her last days lounging on a beach in a different country. As soon as that thought popped in her head, she had a flashback of killing the man at the gas station. He was likely someone's husband and maybe a father. Even if he had been neither of those, he had been someone's son, and she knew she wanted to kill again. Sitting in this little shop, her bloodlust wasn't ruling her, but maybe that was thanks to the smoke that was still clouding the air around her. Okay, Mallory said, feeling at a loss for the right words. She reached up and unlatched her mother's necklace. Glancing down at it, she remembered when her mother removed it from her own neck to hand to Mallory when she was dying in that damn hospital. It was the last thing she had from her mother that she had touched. Monique quickly snatched the necklace from Mallory and dropped it in the wooden box that the amulet had been in. Then, with a slight smile, she held out the amulet for Mallory. She reached out, and as soon as the gold touched her hand, an overwhelming sense of foreboding rushed through her. The thing was old and had notes of evil and violence. It felt like it had been crafted by the gods and morphed out of anger and malice. With shaking hands, Mallory latched the necklace around her neck, and the thing seemed to whisper to her, saying hello and that together they would wreak havoc on the world. Mallory hoped she had imagined the second part, because she had enough chaos raging through her body without adding some ancient necklace into the mix. With that, it's settled. I have for you a jar of my blood and a jar of potent herbs to slow down your transition into a mindless beast. Take a sip of my blood 2 to 3 times a day to keep your body from shutting down. It should last at least a month tops at this regimen. For the herbs, I would suggest smoking from a pipe a couple of times a day as well. I would also suggest drinking from a human at least once a day while you're on your journey. Remember that the longer you deny yourself fresh blood, the more likely you are to lose yourself and kill. Any questions? Do you know the name of the town or province that Bruno is located in? Mallory asked in an effort to get more information before she set off into the Mexico border. I would suggest searching in Iquitos first and then go from there, Monique told her with a straight face. With a nod, Mallory stood up and grabbed the glass pipe. Monique stood up as well, handing her the jar of blood and then the jar full of herbs. Good luck, and don't fail us on this trip, Monique told her as she pushed her out the front door of the shop. Mallory looked back at the woman and nodded as she stepped out into the cool evening air.